Ashtatarashatashmat Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmat Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Tashmat Srila Bhaktivedanta Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmat Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmat Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadash Raghunath Shar Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Mona Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Narayana Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhavo putreti tanmayataya taravo binedu stang sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi narayanam namaskrityam narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridantasto Yabhadrani Vidhunati Suritsatam Nashta Prayesh Vabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavaivasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Kshiptastakama Ditaranga Madhe Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapana Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams Indira Mataji, Rupa Manjari Didi and Raseshwari Mataji. Dandavat pranams. So Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. First, Puranjan's death. Prajvara, which is, what is it? Vishnu's fever, like a fever that's coming from the Lord. Then Kalakanya, who is old age. And the soldiers of Bhai, her husband, they attack Puranjan's city. Puranjan becomes miserable. The city's superintendent, the five-hooded serpent, which is the vital life heir, couldn't defend the city and wished to leave. Puranjan's, okay, we read from 18 to 31 yesterday, so let's just read it from here. Puranjan's lamentation about his wife and children. So Puranjan was anxiously thinking, when I die, how will my wife be able to maintain all the children and other family members? Remembrance of past dealings with his wife. She couldn't eat or bathe unless I did. She was so devoted to me that if I became angry and scolded her, she would remain silent in fear and tolerate me. She would instruct me when I was foolish. When I was away, she would lament. Having many sons, how will she be able to perform the household duties? After my death, how will my sons and daughters continue their lives, being fully dependent on me? Their position will be like that of the passengers on a shattered boat in the midst of the ocean. The king's lamentation was not befitting, yet he did so out of miserly intelligence. And Puranjan's death. Bhaya approached to arrest him at that time. When the Yavanas were taking him to their abode and binding him like an animal, the king's followers, which is the various life heirs, lamented and were forced to go along with him. It wasn't just the various life heirs. I remember it was like the senses, and there's a few different things I thought. Anyways. As soon as the snake left the city was dismantled and smashed to dust. As the king was being dragged forcibly by the Yavanas, being in ignorance, he could not remember his friend and well-wisher, the Supersoul. The unkind king had killed many animals in various sacrifices. Remembering these, all those animals began to pierce him with their horns like axes. Oh yeah, and I guess nothing could go with him other than... never mind. Okay, because of contaminated association with women and being bereft of intelligence, the king suffered all the pangs of material existence for many years and remained in darkness. Puranjan becomes Princess Vaidarbhi in his next life. Puranjan died while remembering his wife, and consequently, in his next life, he was born as the beautiful daughter of the king Vaidarbha. Malayadhvaja, the best of the learned, and conqueror of enemy cities, after defeating other kings in battle, married the daughter of the king Vaidarbha as prize for his chivalry. Note: Bhakti arises from the association of devotees by their spontaneous mercy. That is shown in Puranjan's next life as Vaidarbhi, where he attained the association of a devotee through marriage. The following are the real meanings of the terms. So the term King Malayadhvaja, the meaning of that is the best among the devotees, who are equal to the Malaya mountain range, and similarly worthy of worship. Their glories are so huge that you can't even see the top of them, like the Himalaya mountains. Upayeme means accepting to be a student. Okay, so when she married, see up here it says Upayeme. When she married, that means she accepted to be a student. And Parapuranjaya, which means he's the conqueror of the enemy cities. So that means he who cuts the doubts arising from other philosophies. And Viryapanam, he married the daughter of King Vaidarbha as a prize for his chivalry, viryapanam. So that chivalry means he had great mercy as his power. His virya, his power was great mercy. Progeny. Malayadhvaja begot in Vaidarbhi a daughter who had very black eyes, and seven younger sons who became kings of the 7 southern provinces. Note, daughter, asitikshana means who received the glance of Krishna, or who has a taste for serving Krishna, which is developed by the mercy of a guru. And the sons. The 7 sons are Shravanam, Kirtanam, up to Dasyam. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Bandhanam, Dasyam. Hey, that's 5. Anyhow, because Sakyam and Atmanivedanam are difficult in the beginning and will appear spontaneously later, they are not mentioned. Okay. Shravanam, Kirtanam. Okay. Never mind. Yeah. So 7. These 7 sons gave birth to thousands of sons, whose descendants protected the entire world for the rest of Manu's life and after. Note, many sons indicates that processes like Shravanam can each be subdivided into innumerable categories in different ways, like hearing the name, the pastimes or qualities of the Lord, according to worship of different avatars, according to different rasas. Their descendants are the 4 different sampradayas. They ruled the whole world. This means that earth was protected from ignorance and materialistic karma yoga. Okay, this is what we read up to yesterday. And actually, we didn't read the purport. So let's read the purport of this now. Oh yeah, and the purport before this, as Rupa Manjari pointed out yesterday, was really beautiful. The process of becoming friends of the Lord and sacrificing everything belongs to the category of Rag Marg. For the neophyte, generally, the great devotees who preach devotional service all over the world belong to the category of Sakyam Atmanivedanam. A neophyte devotee cannot actually become a preacher. The neophyte is advised to execute. Anyhow. Okay. So we read the Sanskrit and translation yesterday. I'm just going to read the translation. My dear King Prachinabarhishat, the sons of Malayadhvaja gave birth to many thousands and thousands of sons, and all of these have been protecting the entire world up to the end of one Manu's lifespan, and even afterward. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma. A Manvantar, the lifespan of one Manu, is given as 71 multiplied by 4,320,000 years. After one such Manu passes on, another Manu begins his lifespan. In this way, the life cycle of the universe is going on. As one Manu follows another, the cult of Krishna consciousness is being imparted, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.1. Shri Bhagavan Imam vivasvate yogam proktavan ahamapyayam vivasvan manave praha manur ikshvakave bravit. The Blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god, Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind. And Manu, in turn, instructed it to Ikshvaku. Vivasvan, the sun god, imparted Bhagavad Gita to one Manu, and this Manu imparted it to his son, who imparted it to yet another Manu. In this way, the propagation of Krishna consciousness is never stopped. No one should think that this Krishna consciousness movement is a new movement. As confirmed by Bhagavad Gita and Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is a very old movement, for it has been passing down from one Manu to another. Among Vaishnavas, there may be some difference of opinion due to everyone's personal identity. But despite all personal differences, the cult of Krishna consciousness must go on. We can see that under the instructions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, began preaching the Krishna consciousness movement in an organized way within the past 100 years. The disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj are all god brothers. Oh, we did read this. Anyhow, and although there are some differences of opinion, and although we are not acting conjointly, every one of us is spreading this Krishna consciousness movement according to his own capacity and producing many disciples to spread it all over the world. As far as we are concerned, we have already started the international... Okay, we did read this. Indeed, it is spreading like wildfire. The cult of Krishna consciousness based on the 9 principles of devotional service will never be stopped. It will go on with distinction of caste, creed, color, or country. No one can check it. The word bhokshate is very important in this verse. Okay. Anyhow. Yeah, it is a really beautiful purport. Anyways, I'm just going to continue. Agastya pragduhitaram upayeme dritavratam yasyam tridachuto jata idmavahat majo muni. The great sage named Agastya married the firstborn daughter of Malayadhvaja, the avowed devotee of Lord Krishna. From her, one son was born, whose name was Dhridachuta. And from him, another son was born, whose name was Idmavaha. Purport. The name Agastya Muni is very significant. Agastya Muni represents the mind. The word Agastya indicates that the senses do not act independently, and the word Muni means mind. The mind is the center of all the senses, and thus the senses cannot work independent of the mind. When the mind takes to the cult of bhakti, it engages in devotional service. The cult of bhakti, the Bhakti Lata, is the first daughter of Malayadhvaja, and as previously described, her eyes are always upon Krishna, asite kshanam. One cannot render bhakti to any demigod. Bhakti can be rendered only to Vishnu, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Thinking the absolute truth to be without form, the Mayavadis say that the word bhakti can apply to any form of worship. If this were the case, a devotee could imagine any demigod or any godly form and worship it. This, however, is not the real fact. The real fact is that bhakti can be applied only to Lord Vishnu and his expansions. Therefore, Bhakti Lata is Dhrida Vrata, the great vow, for when the mind is completely engaged in devotional service, the mind does not fall down. If one tries to advance by other means, by karma yoga or jnana yoga, one will fall down. But if one is fixed in bhakti, he never falls down. Thus from Bhakti Lata, the son Dhridachuta is born, and from Dhridachuta the next son, Idmavaha, is born. The word Idmavaha refers to one who carries wood for burning in a sacrifice when approaching a spiritual master. The point is that Bhakti Lata, the cult of devotion, fixes one in a spiritual position. One so fixed never comes down, and he begets children who are strict followers of the shastric injunctions. As said in the Vedas, Tadvigyanartam sagurum eva bigachet samit pani shrotriyam brahmanishtam. To understand these teachings properly, one must humbly approach with firewood in hand a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth. Mundaka Upanishad 1-12. In the line of devotional service, those who are initiated are strict followers of the Vedic scriptural injunctions. I think there is an extra sentence in there. Anyhow. Yeah, doesn't matter. Vibhajya tanayebhya kshmam rajarshir Malayadhvaja ariradaishu krishnam sajagama kulachalam. After this, the great saintly king Malayadhvaja divided his entire kingdom among his sons. Then, in order to worship Lord Krishna with full attention, he went to a solitary place known as Kulachala. Purport. Malayadhvaja, the great king, was certainly a Mahabhagavat, a topmost devotee. By executing devotional service, he begot many sons and disciples for propagating the bhakti cult, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Actually, the entire world should be divided among such disciples. Everyone should be engaged in preaching the cult of Krishna consciousness. In other words, when disciples are grown up and are able to preach, the spiritual master should retire and sit down in a solitary place to write and execute nirjan bhajan. This means sitting silently in a solitary place and executing devotional service. This nirjan bhajan, which is the silent worship of the Supreme Lord, is not possible for a neophyte devotee. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur never advised a neophyte devotee to go to a solitary place to engage in devotional service. Indeed, he has written a song in this connection. Dushtaman tumi kisera Vaishnava pratishtara tare nirjanera ghare tava harinam kevala kaitava. My dear mind, what kind of devotee are you? Simply for cheap adoration, you sit in a solitary place and pretend to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, but this is all cheating. Thus, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur advocated that every devotee, under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, preach the bhakti cult, Krishna consciousness, all over the world. Only when one is mature can he sit in a solitary place and retire from preaching all over the world. Following this example, the devotees of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness now render service as preachers in various parts of the world. Now they can allow the spiritual master their spiritual master to retire from active preaching work. In the last stage of the spiritual master's life, the devotees of the spiritual master should take preaching activities into their own hands. In this way, the spiritual master can sit down in a solitary place and render nirjan bhajan. Srila Prabhupada wrote that in the 4th canto. We all know that didn't happen, that Srila Prabhupada never got a chance to go sit in a solitary place and render nirjan bhajan. Anyhow, he was active to his very last words was, what is it, the 13th chapter of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that is the very end of the 10th canto, I mean. Hitva grihan sutan bhogan Vaidarbhi madirekshana andvadhavata pandesham jyotsneva rajanikaram. Yeah, my God, how much Srila Prabhupada sacrificed. He'd be so much happier doing nirjan bhajan, but he just never stopped. Okay. I mean, not so much happier, that's what he wanted to do, but he had to do it. He had this service. Okay, just as the moonshine follows the moon at night, immediately after King Malayadhvaja departed for Kulachal, his devoted wife, whose eyes were very enchanting, followed him, giving up all homely happiness despite family and children. Purport. Just as in the Vanaprastha stage, the wife follows the husband. Similarly, when the spiritual master retires for nirjan bhajan, some of his advanced devotees follow him and engage in his personal service. In other words, those who are very fond of family life should come forward in the service of the spiritual master and abandon so-called happiness afforded by society, friendship, and love. A verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and his Guru Vashtak is significant in this regard. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasada. A disciple should always remember that by serving the spiritual master, he can easily advance in Krishna consciousness. All the scriptures recommend that it is by pleasing the spiritual master and serving him directly that one can attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service. The word madirekshana is also significant in this verse. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained in his Sandarbha that the word madira means intoxicating. If one's eyes become intoxicated upon seeing the deity, he may be called Madhirekshana. Queen Vaidarbhi's eyes were very enchanting, just as one's eyes are Madhirekshana when engaged in seeing the temple deity. Unless one is an advanced devotee, he cannot fix his eyes on the deity in the temple. Tatra chandra vasanama tamra parni batodaka tat punya salilar nityam ubhayatrat manomrajan kandashti bir mulapanai pushpa parnai strinodakai vartamana shanargatra karshanam tapa astita. In the province of Kulachal, there were rivers named Chandravasa, Tamraparni, and Vatodaka. King Malayadhvaja used to go to those pious rivers regularly and take his bath there. Thus he purified himself externally and internally. He took his bath and ate bulbs, seeds, leaves, flowers, roots, fruits, and grasses, and drank water. In this way he underwent severe austerities. Eventually, he became very skinny. We can definitely see that to advance in Krishna consciousness, one must control his bodily weight. If one becomes too fat, it is to be assumed that he is not advancing spiritually. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur severely criticized his fat disciples. The idea is that one who intends to advance in Krishna consciousness must not eat very much. Devotees used to go to forests, high hills, or mountains on pilgrimages, but such severe austerities are not possible in these days. One should instead eat only prasad and no more than required. According to the Vaishnava calendar, there are many fasts, such as Ekadashi and the appearance and disappearance days of God and his devotees. All of these are meant to decrease the fat within the body so that one will not sleep more than desired and will not become inactive and lazy. Overindulgence in food will cause a man to sleep more than required. The human form of life is meant for austerity, and austerity means controlling sex, food intake, etc. In this way, time can be saved for spiritual activity, and one can purify himself both externally and internally. Thus, both body and mind can be cleansed. Shitoshna vatavarshani kshut pipase priya priye sukha dukhe iti dvandvanya jayat samadarshana. Through austerity, King Malayadhvaja in body and mind gradually became equal to the dualities of cold and heat. He became equal to the dualities of cold and heat, happiness and distress, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the pleasant and the unpleasant. In this way, he conquered all relativities. Purport. Liberation means becoming free from the relativities of the world. Unless one is self-realized, he has to undergo the dual struggle of the relative world. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna to conquer all relativities through tolerance. Lord Krishna points out that it is the relativities like winter and summer that give us trouble in the material world. In the winter, we do not like taking a bath, but in the summer, we wish to take a bath twice, thrice, or more a day. Thus, Krishna advises us not to be disturbed by such relativities and dualities when they come and go. The common man has to undergo much austerity to become equipoise before dualities. One who becomes agitated by the relativities of life has accepted a relative position and must therefore undergo the austerities prescribed in the Shastras to transcend the material body and put an end to material existence. King Malayadhvaja underwent severe austerities by leaving his home, going to Kulachal, taking his bath in the sacred rivers, and eating only vegetables like stems, roots, seeds, flowers, and leaves, avoiding any cooked food or grains. These are very, very austere practices. In this age, it is difficult to leave home and go to the forest or the Himalayas to adopt the processes of austerity. Indeed, it is almost impossible. Sorry, I'd have to clear my throat. Even if one is advised to give up meat eating, drinking, gambling, and illicit sex, one will fail to do so. What then would a person do if he went to the Himalayas or Kulachal? Such acts of renunciation are not possible in this age. Therefore, Lord Krishna has advised us to accept the Bhakti Yoga process. Bhakti Yoga will automatically liberate a person from the dualities of life. In Bhakti Yoga, Krishna is the center, and Krishna is always transcendental. Thus, in order to transcend dualities, one must always engage in the service of the Lord, as confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. If one is factually engaged in the service of the Lord, Bhakti Yoga, he will automatically control his senses, his tongue, and so many other things. Once engaged in the Bhakti Yoga process with all sincerity, one will have no chance of falling down. Even if one falls down, there is no loss. One's devotional activities may be stunned or choked for the time being, but as soon as there is another chance, the practitioner begins from the point where he left off. Tapasa vidyaya pakva kashaya niyamay yamay yuyuje brahmanatmanam vijataksha nilashaya. By worshipping, executing austerities, and following the regulative principles, King Malayadhvaja conquered his senses, his life, and his consciousness. Thus he fixed everything on the central point of the Supreme Brahman, Krishna. Purport. Whenever the word Brahman appears, then personalists take this to mean the impersonal effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, however, Parabrahma, the Supreme Brahman, is Krishna, Vasudeva. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Vasudeva sarvam iti. Vasudeva extends everywhere as the impersonal Brahman. One cannot fix one's mind upon an impersonal something. Bhagavad Gita 12:5 therefore says, Klesho dikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. Consequently, when it is said herein that Malayadhvaja fixed his mind on Brahman, Brahman means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Astistanuravaikaktra devyam varsham shatastira vasudeve bhagavate nanyarvedo dvahan ratim. In this way he stayed immovable in one place for 100 years by the calculations of the demigods. After this time, he developed pure devotional attraction for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and remained fixed in that position. Bahunam janmanamante jnanabhamam prapadyate vasudeva saram iti sa mahatma sadurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge fully surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, is everything, and one who knows this is the greatest of all transcendentalists. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that one realizes this after many, many births. This is also confirmed in this verse with the words Divyam Varsha Shatam, 100 years according to the calculations of the demigods. According to the calculations of the demigods, one day, 12 hours, is equal to 6 months on earth. 100 years of the demigods would equal 36,000 earth years. One second. After this time, he became fixed in devotional service of the Lord. To live on earth for so many years, one has to take birth many times. This confirms the conclusion of Krishna. To come to the conclusion of Krishna consciousness and remain fixed in the realization that Krishna is everything, as well as render service unto Krishna, are characteristics of the perfectional stage. As said in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22:62, Krishna Bhakti Koile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. When one comes to the conclusion that Krishna is everything, let me just check the book. Is there a word missing? Sorry. Okay. When one comes to the conclusion that Krishna is everything by worshipping or by rendering devotional service unto Krishna, one actually becomes perfect in all respects. Okay, there wasn't anything missing. Not only must one come to the conclusion that Krishna is everything, but he must remain fixed in this realization. That this is the highest perfection of life, and it is this perfection that King Malayadhvaja attained at the end. That's a mistake though, isn't it? In English, when one comes to the conclusion that Krishna is everything by worshipping or rendering devotion unto Krishna. Oh, I guess it makes sense. It does make sense. Kinda. I don't know. Savyapakatayatmanam vyatirik Vedvan Swapna Iva Marsha Shakshinam Viraramaha. King Malayadhvaja attained perfect knowledge by being able to distinguish the supersoul from the individual soul. The individual soul is localized, whereas the supersoul is all-pervasive. He became perfect in knowledge that the material body is not the soul, but that the soul is the witness of the material body. Purport. The conditioned soul is often frustrated in trying to understand the distinctions between the material body, the supersoul, and the individual soul. There are two types of Mayavadi philosophers, the followers of the Buddhist philosophy and the followers of the Shankar philosophy. The followers of Buddha do not recognize that there is anything beyond the body. The followers of Shankar conclude that there is no separate existence of the Paramatma, the supersoul. The Shankarites believe that the individual soul is identical with the Paramatma in the ultimate analysis. But the Vaishnava philosopher who is perfect in knowledge knows that the body is made of the external energy and that the supersoul, the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, oh God, sorry. 1 second. I ate a ton of mishti doi yesterday, so now it's coming out. The Vaishnava philosopher who is perfect in knowledge knows that the body is made of the external energy and that the supersoul, the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is sitting with the individual soul and is distinct from him. As Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita 13.3, Kshetragyam chapiyat mam vedi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetra kyayor jnanam yataj jnanam matam mama. Oh yes. 1 second. I'm gonna get a. It's okay. My throat's clear. I'm gonna have a record later. Okay. O Scion of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. The body is taken to be the field, and the individual soul is taken to be the worker in that field. Yet there is another, who is known as the supersoul, who, along with the individual soul, simply witnesses. The individual soul works and enjoys the fruits of the body, whereas the supersoul simply witnesses the activities of the individual soul, but does not enjoy the fruits of those activities. The supersoul is present in every field of activity, whereas the individual soul is present in his one localized body. King Malayadhvaja attained this perfection of knowledge and was able to distinguish between the soul and the supersoul, and the body and the material body. Shakshar Bhagavatot Ktena Guruna Harina Nripa Vishuddha Jnanadipena Spurata Vishvato Mukham. In this way, King Malayadhvaja attained perfect knowledge because in his pure state, he was directly instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By means of such enlightening transcendental knowledge, he could understand everything from all angles of vision. Purport. In this verse, the words Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Guruna Harina are very significant. The Supreme Personality of Godhead speaks directly to the individual soul when the devotee has completely purified himself by rendering devotional service to the Lord. Lord Krishna confirms this also in Bhagavad Gita 10.10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. The Lord is the Supersoul seated in everyone's heart, and he acts as the Chaitaguru, the spiritual master within. However, he gives direct instructions only to the advanced, pure devotees. In the beginning, when a devotee is serious and sincere, the Lord gives him directions from within to approach a bona fide spiritual master. When one is trained by the spiritual master according to the regulative principles of devotional service and is situated on the platform of spontaneous attachment for the Lord, Rag Bhakti, the Lord also gives instructions from within. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam. The distinct advantage is obtained by a liberated soul. Having attained this stage, King Malayadhvaja was directly in touch with the Supreme Lord and was receiving instructions from him directly. Pyre brahmani chatmanam param brahma tatatmani vikshamano vihayeksham asmar upararamaha. King Malayadhvaja could thus observe that the Supersoul was sitting by his side, and that he, as the individual soul, was sitting by the side of the Supersoul. Since both were together, there was no need for separate interests. Thus he ceased from such activities. Purport. In the advanced stage of devotional service, the devotee does not see anything separate between his own interests and those of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Both interests become one, for the devotee does not act for a separate interest. Whatever he does in the interest of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, he sees everything in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything. Hey, that's the verse, Sarvaputeshu ya pashed bhagavad bhavam atmana. We just learned this in our shloka group. That's the last shloka we learned. Having attained this stage of understanding, he sees no distinction between the spiritual and material worlds. In perfect vision, the material world becomes the spiritual world due to its being the external energy of the Supreme Lord. For the perfect devotee, the energy and the energetic are non-different. Shakti Shakti Matayor Abid. Thus, the so-called material world becomes spiritual. Sarvam Kala Vidam Brahma. Everything is intended for the service of the Supreme Lord, and the expert devotee can utilize any so-called material thing for the Lord's service. One cannot serve the Lord without being situated on the spiritual platform. Thus, if a so-called material thing is dovetailed in the service of the Lord, it is no longer to be considered material. Thus, the pure devotee in his perfect vision sees from all angles. Patim paramadharmagyam Vaidarbhi Malayadhvajam Premna paryacharaditva bhogansa patidevata. The daughter of King Vaidarbhi accepted her husband she accepted her husband all in all as the Supreme. She gave up all sensual enjoyment and in complete renunciation followed the principles of her husband, who was so advanced. Thus she remained engaged in his service. Purport. Figuratively, King Malayadhvaja is the spiritual master and his wife Vaidarbhi is the disciple. The disciple accepts the spiritual master as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Guru Rashtak, Shakshad Dharitvena, one directly accepts the Guru, the spiritual master, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should accept the spiritual master not in the sense that the Mayavadi philosophers do, but in the way recommended here. Since the spiritual master is the most confidential servant of the Lord, he should be treated exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master should never be neglected or disobeyed like an ordinary person. If a woman is fortunate enough to be the wife of a pure devotee, she can serve her husband without any desire for sense gratification. If she remains engaged in the service of her exalted husband, she will automatically attain the spiritual perfections of her husband. If a disciple gets a bona fide spiritual master, simply by satisfying him, he can attain a similar opportunity to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chiravasa Vratakshama Veni Bhuta Shiroruha Bhavupapatim Shanta Shika Shantam Ivanalam. What verse are we reading up to? Oops. 50. Okay. The daughter of King Vaidarbhi wore old garments, and she was lean and thin because of her vows of austerity. Since she did not arrange her hair, it became entangled and twisted in locks. Although she remained always near her husband, she was as silent and unagitated as the flame of an undisturbed fire. Purport. When one begins to burn firewood, there is smoke and agitation in the beginning. Although there are so many disturbances in the beginning, once the fire is completely set, the fire burns steadily. Similarly, when both the husband and wife follow the regulative principles of austerity, they remain silent and are not agitated by sex impulses. At such a time, both husband and wife are benefited spiritually. One can attain this stage of life by completely giving up a luxurious mode of life. In this verse, the word chiravasa refers to very old torn garments. The wife especially should remain austere, not desiring luxurious dresses and living standards. She should accept only the bare necessities of life and minimize her eating and sleeping. There should be no question of mating. Simply by engaging in the service of her exalted husband, who must be a pure devotee, the wife will never be agitated by sex impulses. The vanaprastha stage is exactly like this. Although the wife remains with the husband, she undergoes severe austerities and penances, so that although both husband and wife live together, there is no question of sex. In this way, both husband and wife can live together perpetually. Since the wife is weaker than the husband, this weakness is expressed in the verse with the words upapatim. Upa means near to, or almost equal to. Being a man, the husband is generally more advanced than his wife. Nonetheless, the wife is expected to give up all luxurious habits. She should not even dress nicely or comb her hair. Hair combing is one of the main business of women. In the vanaprastha stage, the wife should not take care of her hair. Thus her hair will become tangled in knots. Consequently, the wife will no longer be attractive to the husband, and she herself will no longer be agitated by sex impulses. In this way, both husband and wife can advance in spiritual consciousness. This advanced stage is called the Paramahansa stage, and once it is obtained, both husband and wife can actually be liberated from bodily consciousness. If the disciple remains steady in the service of the Supreme Master, he need no longer fear falling down into the clutches of Maya. Ajanati priyatamam yadoparataram yado parataramankana sustirasanamasādhya yatta purvam upacharat. The daughter of King Vaidarbhi continued as usual to serve her husband, who was seated in a steady posture, until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. Purport. It appears that the queen did not even talk to her husband while serving. She would simply perform her prescribed duties without talk. Thus she did not stop rendering service until she could ascertain that her husband had passed from the body. Yadano palabhitang krav ushmanam patyurat archati asit samvigna hridaya yuta brashta mrigiyata. While she was serving her husband by massaging his legs, she could feel that his feet were no longer warm and could thus understand that he had already passed from the body. She felt great anxiety upon being left alone, bereft of her husband's company. She felt exactly as the deer feels upon being separated from its mate. Purport. As soon as the circulation of blood and air within the body stops, it is to be understood that the soul within the body has left. The stoppage of the blood circulation is perceived when the hands and feet lose heat. One tests whether a body is alive or not by feeling the heart's palpitations and the coldness of the feet and hands. Atmanam sochati dinam ampandum viklava shrubi stanav asitcha vipine suswaram prarodasa. Being now alone and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vaidarbhi began to lament, incessantly shedding tears, which soaked her breast and crying very loudly. Purport. Figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. Wow, that is such a good sentence. Okay, this is called the association of vani, words. Physical presence is called vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. I'm going to share this on Facebook. It's so beautiful. Uttishta rajarshe imam udadime kalam tasyubhya kshatra bandhubhyo bibhyatim patumarhasi. O best of kings, please get up! Get up! Just see this world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her. Purport. Whenever an acharya comes, following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, he establishes the principles of religion, as enunciated in Bhagavad Gita. Religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time that one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everyone to bow down before the Supreme Lord. One executes the religious principles by rendering devotional service, specifically the 9 items like hearing, chanting, and remembering. Unfortunately, when the acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. Human life is meant for executing the orders of the Supreme Lord, and this is stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Madmana bhava madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mami vaishyasi satyam mami vaishyasi yuktvainvam atmanam matparayanam. Engage your mind always in thinking of me and becoming my devotee. Offer obeisances and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, to become His devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord, and to bow down before Him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles, but when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. At the present moment, practically the entire world is afraid of rogues and non-devotees. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is started to save the world from irreligious principles. Everyone should cooperate with this movement in order to bring about actual peace and happiness in the world. Evam vilapanti bala vipinenu gatapatim patita padayor bhartu rudatashrunyavardayat. That most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. Purport. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. Chittam daru mayim chitva tasyam patyu kalevaram adipya chanumarane vilapanti manodadhe. Then she prepared a blazing fire with firewood and placed the dead body of her husband upon it. When this is finished, she lamented severely and prepared herself to perish in the fire with her husband. Purport. It is the long-standing tradition of the Vedic system that a faithful wife dies along with her husband. This is called Sahamaran. In India, this system was prevalent even to the date of British occupation. At that time, however, a wife who did not wish to die with her husband was sometimes forced to do so by her relatives. Formerly, that was not the case. The wife used to enter the fire voluntarily. The British government stopped this practice, considering it inhumane, right? Anyways, inhuman. However, from the early history of India, we find that when Maharaj Pandu died, he was survived by two wives, Madri and Kunti. The question was whether both should die or one should die. After the death of Maharaj Pandu, his wives settled that one should remain and the other should go. Madri would perish with her husband in the fire, and Kunti would remain to take charge of the 5 Pandava children. Even as late as 1936, we saw a devoted wife voluntarily enter the fire of her husband. This indicates that a devotee's wife must be prepared to act in such a way. Similarly, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. Wow, that was strong. Actually, my Param Gurudev, he writes a whole article, where was it? Was it in the Kriti Ratna book? Yeah, in the Kriti Ratna book, my Param Gurudev talks about on this topic. In order to execute the will of the spiritual master, that's the ultimate test, is if we're willing to even lay down our life for our spiritual master. Yeah, it's beautiful thing. Anyways, I'm gonna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, oh Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtar Shmar Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Srila Gurudev ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtar Shmar Srila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtar Shmar Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtar Shmar Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtar Shmar Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki Jai. Vrishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Nitila Pravachararanda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai. Nitila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadash Raghunath Shar Gosai Prabhu ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gopal Vrinda ki Jai. Naam Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki Sarva Abhishta Bharata Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Vansha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhyai Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandava Pranams. Oh, and if anybody's late, you can go right now, but I just wanted to read something on this topic by my Param Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj. It's in the book Kriti Ratna that we published a couple of years ago, and it's in the second article of the book. And Rup Manjari, of course, yes, we can touch base, totally. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, and if anybody's late has to go, you can go. It's short, but love for the Vaishnavas and service to them. Just see what the life of a soldier entails. For a meager monthly stipend that facilitates a bit of fleeting mundane pleasure for his spouse, children, parents, siblings, and friends, he is ready and willing to relinquish his own life. In a moment, he can abandon the love and attachment of his mother, father, and relatives, and is determined to give his life. To what extent do we do that for Shri, Guru, and Vaishnavas? The love of sadhus, Guru, and Vaishnavas affords us the wealth of true happiness for all time. Yet we are not prepared to accept even a drop of difficulty for their sake, not to speak of giving up our life for them. Is this the sign of a servant of Hari, Guru, and Vaishnavas? How magnanimous, how tranquil, how great are the hearts of those who do not hesitate even slightly to relinquish their life for the service of Vaishnavas. At the moment of truth, we can assess how much love a sevak has for Hari, Guru, and Vaishnavas. If someone among us were to contract a contagious infectious disease, we would realize the extent of our love for the Vaishnavas. We would not think twice before immediately abandoning that Vaishnav and going as far away as possible for fear of contracting the disease or losing our own life, thus revealing the degree of our attachment to this package of pus, blood, and flesh, which today or after 100 years will certainly perish. We are always saying in discourses, recitations, and kirtan that this body is nothing and that this mind is nothing. But in reality, that is all we deem important. If what we say is not matched to what we do, then we are wasting our words and misleading people. And what is the use of that? Adherence to the truth is a preeminent quality of a Vaishnav. We are always saying that we must give our life to the Vaishnavas. We must offer our everything to the Vaishnavas. And whatever we do, we must do for the service of the Vaishnavas. Will this all remain confined in a mere arrangement of words? Once a person stood ready to give his life for the service of the Vaishnavas, once a person stood ready to give his life for the service of the Vaishnavas, and then some heretic hindered him, and he fell down. This too we have witnessed. This morning you heard the song Jaya Re Jai Paramahansa Mahashaya. You must always note the event indicated in the following line, Kuliyate Pashandira Atyachara Koilajara Tasabara Dosha Kama Kori. And this is to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. You forgave the rogues of Kulia despite the atrocities they committed. I am remembering the incident in Kulia, hinted in this couplet. It was during Sri Navadip Dham Parikrama. To test his servitor's propensity to serve, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, who was on his way to Champahati with a large group of pilgrims, arrived at Navadip, Kulia town. That was some 25 years ago. At the time, Srila Prabhupada's preaching of pure Vaishnava Dharma exposed the religious exploitation and corruption of Kulia's blasphemous hypocrites and provoked their hatred. They came up with a plot and unleashed a horrendous atrocity against him in the Parikrama party at Podamatala. Calamities vanish by the mere will of the Vaishnavas, but the prime purpose for the Acharya's appearance is to reveal to the world that the glories of Sevya, the served, and Sevak, the servant. Therefore, in the midst of the destructive dance of Kali, Srila Prabhupada hid himself in a liquor merchant's house and examined his Sevak's anguish and attachment in relation to him. Oh, and just if you don't know this story, when they went to Podamatala, all there's an ambush, and all these people they had planned it in advance, and this ambush of people came and they started throwing bricks, they started throwing glass and hot water and like all these different things at the devotees. They started attacking the devotees and they wanted to kill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But then in the midst of the destructive dance of Kali, Srila Prabhupada hid himself in a liquor merchant's house and examined his sevak's anguish and attachment in relation to him. In this terrible situation, apart from one or two persons, all of Srila Prabhupada's renowned so-called servants fled for their lives. Thousands of thugs had surrounded the house where Srila Prabhupada had taken refuge. In that moment, one of his servants exchanged garments with Srila Prabhupada, extricated him from the ring of thugs closing in on them, and safely brought him in disguise back to Mayapur. And that person was Srila Bhakti, our Param Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Keshav Goswami Maharaj. He's speaking about himself right now. Perilous circumstances reveal the true nature of a Guru Sevak. Those who are famous in the world as Guru Preshta, dear to Guru, Prabhu Preshta, cherished by Prabhupada, are Acharya Preshta, the Acharya's dearest, who never hesitated to introduce themselves as his exclusively dedicated associates, or who wanted to take pride in being managers of the Mat mission and his primary assistants, did not show up in that evil hour to display the pinnacle of service to Guru. A Guru Sevak's exclusive duty is to give his life in the service of his Guru. Do not maintain a conception that such pastimes of the Acharya are indicative of his being a mere mortal. Events like these in fact serve to reveal his superhuman glory. You may recall hearing of a similar event in the life of Acharya Sri Ramanuja. A Shaiva king became so envious of his effective preaching of Vaishnava Dharma that he tried to kill him. Acharya Sri Ramanuja's devoted and prominent disciple Acharya Kuresh then saved his guru's life by disguising Sri Ramanuja in the clothes of a lady. Similarly, I always have a hard time saying the word similarly. Similarly, Acharya Shankar, who was once attacked by a Kapalik sect, but Acharya Padmapad protected him. Thus, in every Acharya's pastimes, many kinds of calamities occur, which serve to demonstrate his superhuman nature. And on the other hand, the gradations of sevaks that become evident are lessons for the souls of this world. That is why I say, in such circumstances alone, the true measure of a sevak's inclination to serve is revealed. All right. Pretty powerful, huh? Heavy and powerful, but beautiful also. Yes, it is also like my Gurudev serving his godbrother, Ananga Mohan Brahmachari, who had tuberculosis, and my Gurudev was ready to give up his life to serve like that also. Yeah, very true. All right, Dandavat Pranams. Haribol.